The longship cut through the fog like a blade through flesh, its dragon-head prow emerging first from the mist that clung to the North Sea. Standing at the stern, Willa Norrasdottir gripped the wooden rail until her knuckles whitened, watching the shoreline of her homeland recede. Tomorrow's dawn would find her facing the Jarl who had purchased her with silver and promises of alliance. Jarl Hakon Wargson, the berserker of Vestfold, they called him. A man who had slain 30 Saxons in a single battle, who drank from the skulls of his enemies, who had buried 3 wives already. Behind her, Edith huddled against the sail's shadow, her honey-colored hair catching what little sunlight pierced the mist. Poor, loyal Edith, who had served as Willa's handmaiden since childhood. Who now sailed toward a fate meant for her mistress. "My lady," whispered Edith, "your father will discover this deception before the moon completes its cycle." Willa's hand unconsciously went to the polished amber pendant at her throat, the symbol of her noble lineage that no thrall should wear. By then it will be too late. The marriage rites will be complete, and you will be well compensated for your sacrifice. My cousin awaits me in Hedeby. From there, I can make my way to the Christian lands and be free of my father's plots. And what of the Jarl? They say his anger is like Ragnarok unleashed. Willa turned toward the handmaiden, her face hardening into the mask she had perfected through years of navigating her father's treacherous court. Hakon Wargson has never seen me. He knows only that he receives the daughter of Jarl Nori to seal our clan's alliance. One bride is as good as another to a man who purchases women with silver and battle fame. The lie felt bitter on her tongue. All knew that Hakon had demanded Willa specifically, having heard tales of her beauty and her skill with rune casting. But she would rather face her father's wrath, even death itself, than be bound to a man who had slaughtered her mother's kin in the great raid on Lindisfarne. The blood debt between them could never be washed clean, no matter what political alliances her father now sought. What her father called pragmatism, Willa called betrayal. The dead deserved vengeance, not compromise. This was the truth she had carried since watching her mother wither away, consumed by grief for her slaughtered brothers. No peace could exist between victim and destroyer. This Willa knew as surely as she knew the patterns of stars that guided their ship northward. "The gods see our deceptions," Edith murmured, clutching her arm as the ship pitched in the rising waves. "Then let them judge me," Willa answered, feeling the weight of her mother's silver arm ring beneath her sleeve. "I will not warm the bed of the man who made my mother weep until her dying day." 3 days later, as the summer sun hung low in the northern sky, Hakon Wargson stood at the shore awaiting the ship that carried his bride. Behind him, his hall stood decorated with fresh pine boughs and summer flowers, the feasting tables already groaning with food and mead for the wedding celebration. His warriors lined the path from shore to hall, their shields polished to a gleam rarely seen except before great battles. Hakon himself had donned his finest tunic, woven of the softest wool and embroidered with patterns of interlaced beasts. Gold arm rings circled his massive forearms, and a cloak of bear fur hung from his broad shoulders. Yet for all his finery, he could not quiet the storm that brewed within his chest. "You look like a man marching to his execution, not his wedding bed," observed his blood brother Torsten, clapping him on the shoulder. "Marriage is its own kind of death," Hakon replied, watching the approaching sail. "The death of freedom. Yet necessary. Your hall needs a lady, and your bed needs sons." Torsten's voice lowered. "And our people need this alliance with Jarl Nori if we are to survive the coming Saxon campaigns." Hakon grunted acknowledgement but said nothing more. He had agreed to this match for the sake of his people, but the bitter taste of compromise lingered. For 15 years he had waged war against Jarl Nori's raids along his coastline, and now he was to take the man's daughter to wife, to break bread with his longtime enemy. The gods must be laughing at such irony. The ship drew closer, and he could make out the figures on deck. A slender woman stood at the prow, her hair covered in the manner of a noble bride, her posture rigid as a shield wall. Something in her stillness caught his eye, a tension that spoke of more than mere bridal nerves. As the ship's keel scraped against the shore, Hakon waded into the shallow water himself rather than sending his men, an honor he had not planned but found himself compelled to give. Up close, he could see the woman's face beneath her head covering, fair-skinned with downcast eyes, pretty enough but not the stunning beauty rumored of Willa Norrasdottir. He extended his hand to help her from the ship. "Welcome to Vestfold, daughter of Nori." Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it in his, and when she finally raised her gaze to meet his, he saw not hatred or fear, but something worse, resignation, like that of a sacrificial animal before the blade falls. "I am Edith," she said in a voice barely audible above the waves, "handmaiden to Lady Willa." Hakon's hand tightened around hers, and he felt the blood rush to his face. "Where then is my bride?" The woman, Edith, flinched but held her ground with unexpected courage. "My lady has sent me in her place." She could not bring herself to marry the man who slew her mother's brothers at Lindisfarne. A murmur rippled through the gathered warriors. Hakon felt the old rage rising within him, the battle fury that had earned him his fearsome reputation. He released the woman's hand and turned to Torsten. "It seems Jarl Nori sends us insult rather than alliance," he growled, loud enough for all to hear. But before Torsten could respond, the handmaiden spoke again, her voice stronger now. "Jarl Nori knows nothing of this deception. The fault lies with Lady Willa alone, and with me for aiding her. If blood must answer for this dishonor, let it be mine." Hakon turned back to her, surprised by her boldness. No mere servant would offer herself thus. In her eyes, he saw not the cowering fear of a thrall, but something that gave him pause, dignity, even in defeat. "Where has your mistress fled?" he demanded. "To Hedabai, and then to Christian lands where she believes you cannot follow." Hakon threw back his head and laughed, a sound so unexpected that even his own men stepped back. "She believes me a mindless beast who cannot cross into Christian territory? Does she think I raid only in the north?" He gestured broadly to the wealth evident in his hall and settlement. "Half my silver comes from Frankish monasteries and Saxon towns." Edith stood straighter. "She believes you a man bound by the blood you spilled at Lindisfarne, unable to see beyond vengeance to forge true peace." The words struck Hakon like a physical blow. Not because they angered him, but because they echoed thoughts he himself had harbored about Jarl Nori. Had he become the very thing he despised in his enemy, a man so consumed by old hatreds that he could not grasp the chance for something better? "You speak boldly for a handmaiden," he said at last. "I speak as one who has watched Lady Willa mourn her uncles each year at the winter solstice. As one who has seen how hatred has poisoned what could have been a strong alliance." For a long moment, Hakon said nothing, measuring this unexpected woman before him. Then he made a decision that would alter the course of many lives. "Bring her to my hall," he commanded his men. "Not as a prisoner, but as my guest. We have much to discuss before I decide whether to pursue my wayward bride or accept what the Norns have instead placed before me." Edith sat rigidly at the high table, aware of the stares from every person in Hakon's great hall. She had been given clean clothes, not the fine wedding garments intended for Willa, but the respectable attire of a free woman rather than a servant. The amber pendant still hung at her throat, its presence a constant reminder of her deception. Hakon sat beside her, drinking deep from his horn of mead but showing no signs of the drunkenness that afflicted many of his warriors as the evening progressed. His eyes, sharp as winter ice, missed nothing, not the way she carefully selected foods from the shared platters, nor how she refused stronger drink in favor of watered mead. "You do not eat like a handmaiden," he observed when the skald had paused between sagas. "And you do not feast like a berserker," she countered, surprising herself with her boldness. I see no skull cups, no raw meat torn with bare hands. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Disappointed. Confused, she admitted. The tales we hear in my lady's hall paint you as little more than a beast in man's form. And what do your own eyes tell you? Edith studied him openly now, taking in the straight set of his shoulders, the careful way he ensured his guests had food before serving himself, the patient manner in which he had listened to disputes among his people earlier in the day. They tell me tales are often shaped by those who tell them, she said finally. Hakon's laugh was unexpectedly warm. Wisdom from a handmaiden. Tell me then, truth-seer, why did your lady truly flee this match? Was it only for the blood spilled at Lindisfarne? Edith hesitated. Loyalty to Willa warred with the strange compulsion to speak honestly with this man who was nothing like the monster described in her homeland. She believes no peace can exist between your clans, she said carefully. That blood debt can never be balanced by political alliance. And what do you believe? The question caught her off guard. What did a handmaiden's beliefs matter to a jarl? I believe. She began slowly, that blood debt must be acknowledged before it can be settled. That wounds must be clean before they can heal. Hakon studied her with new interest. You speak like one educated in more than serving skills. Heat rose to Edith's cheeks. My father was a skald before raiders took our village. Lady Willa's mother purchased me as companion for her daughter and allowed my learning to continue. A thrall, then. Yet you speak and carry yourself as a free woman. Lady Willa freed me 3 winters ago, though I chose to remain in her service. Out of loyalty? Or lack of alternatives? Edith met his gaze directly. Both, Jarl. Where would a freed woman with no family, no connections go? Something shifted in Hakon's expression, a recognition, perhaps, of shared understanding. He too knew what it meant to be bound by circumstance rather than choice. Tomorrow, he said abruptly, I will show you my settlement. You will see with your own eyes how we live, and perhaps understand better why this alliance matters. And then we shall discuss what is to be done about your absent mistress. Dawn found Edith walking beside Hakon through his settlement, surprising herself with genuine interest in all she saw. This was no crude war camp, but a thriving community. Women worked at looms in open doorways, calling greetings to their jarl as he passed. Children ran between buildings, their laughter bright in the morning air. Fields stretched beyond the defensive walls, green with summer crops. You seem surprised, Hakon observed. I had expected more warriors. Weapons. Those 2 we have. He gestured toward the practice fields where men and some women trained with sword and shield. But a people cannot live by raiding alone. We farm, we trade, we craft. They paused at the smithy, where a massive man hammered glowing metal into what would become a sword blade. Beside him, a boy of perhaps 12 summers pumped the bellows, his face intent with concentration. My son, Ulf, Hakon said with unmistakable pride. Learning the smith's craft before he takes up the sword. A warrior should understand how his weapons are made. Edith studied the boy, seeing the father in his strong features and direct gaze. He has your look about him. So they say, though he has his mother's gentler heart, thanks to the gods. His mother, Edith began cautiously, died bringing my daughter into the world 6 winters ago. Hakon's face showed the grief he still carried. Runa lives with her mother's sister in the next settlement, being raised in a woman's household until she is old enough to return to mine. They continued walking, passing storehouses filled with grain and smoked meat, workshops where bone and antler were carved into combs and gaming pieces, a small temple where offerings to the gods lay carefully arranged. And what of Lindisfarne? Edith finally asked, unable to contain the question any longer. "What drove you to such slaughter there?" Hakon's stride faltered for just a moment. "You do not shrink from difficult questions. If I am to understand, I must know the truth of it." He led her to a stone jutting from the earth at the settlement's edge, gesturing for her to sit beside him. For a long moment, he stared out toward the sea, his expression distant. 16 summers ago, he began, Saxon raiders attacked a settlement much like this one, north of here, while most warriors were away fishing. They took slaves, silver, and lives, including my sister and her infant daughter. Edith felt a chill despite the warm morning. "Lady Willa's uncles?" "No." Hakon shook his head. "Mercians under a lord called Evald. But when we tracked them, they had taken shelter at the monastery at Lindisfarne. The monks denied us justice, hid our stolen people behind their Christian walls and claimed their god's protection. So you attacked holy men for sheltering your enemies." "I attacked those who chose sides in a blood feud not their own." His voice hardened. "We recovered what few survivors remained, including my sister, though her child was already dead from exposure. The monks who directly opposed us died. As did the Mercian raiders." "And Willa's uncles? Were they among these raiders?" Hakon's face showed genuine confusion. No Saxon lord was present, only his warriors. Willa's uncles would have been noblemen, not common raiders. Understanding dawned slowly. "They were among the monks," Edith said quietly. "Younger sons often take the cloth in Christian lands. Lady Willa's mother was half Saxon, her brothers full Christians. Now it was Hakon who looked stricken. Then they died not as warriors in honorable combat, but as holy men defending those they believed deserved sanctuary." The weight of this revelation settled between them. Neither spoke for some time, each lost in the implications of this new understanding. Finally, Hakon broke the silence. "All these years, I believed Jarl Nori's hostility stemmed from wounded pride that I had successfully raided where he could not. I never knew I had slain his kin. And all these years, Lady Willa believed you attacked without provocation, slaughtering innocents for glory and plunder." Their eyes met in shared recognition of the tragedy born of misunderstanding. In that moment, something shifted between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile tendril of possibility. "What will you do now?" Edith asked. "Will you pursue Lady Willa for the insult to your honor?" Hakon's laugh held no humor. "What honor is there in forcing a woman to wed the man she believes murdered her kin without cause? Yet your people need this alliance. They need peace with Jarl Nori's clan, yes." He studied her thoughtfully. "Tell me, truth speaker, if you stood before Jarl Nori now, what would you counsel?" Edith considered carefully before answering. "I would tell him that blood has answered blood already, that more vengeance will only empty both your halls of sons and daughters. I would tell him that Lady Willa's flight offers not insult, but opportunity to forge an alliance built on truth rather than deception." "And how would you forge such an alliance without the marriage that was promised?" "I?" Edith faltered, suddenly aware of the intensity of his gaze. Hakon stood abruptly. "Come. There is one more place I would show you before the day grows too old." The path wound upward through pine forests, eventually opening to a high meadow overlooking the fjord. Here stood a single standing stone, runes carved deep into its weathered surface. "My first wife," Hakon said quietly. "Mother to Ulf. Here I pledge to raise our son to be a man of both sword and wisdom." He moved to another stone a few paces away. "My second wife, who died of fever the winter after our marriage." A third stone, smaller than the others. "And here, Astrid, mother to Runa, who gave her life that our daughter might live." Edith stood respectfully silent, understanding now why he had brought her to this private place of remembrance. 3 times I have taken a wife, Hakon said, his voice low. 2 for love, once for alliance. I had thought this 4th marriage would be duty alone, a price paid for my people's security. He turned to her, his expression more vulnerable than she had yet seen it. I did not expect to find wisdom and courage in the woman sent in my bride's place. Jarl Hakon. I am no longer young, he continued. I have seen enough of death to know the value of life. Of peace. Of understanding between people who have viewed each other only through the lens of hatred. Edith felt her heart beating in her throat. What are you suggesting? Stay, he said simply. Not as hostage or servant. Stay as my guest through the next moon cycle. Let me send word to Jarl Nori explaining what has happened, not as accusation, but as opportunity to resolve old wrongs. Let him know his daughter is safe, if fled, and that I seek understanding rather than retribution. And if he demands my punishment for my role in the deception, then he reveals himself as unworthy of alliance, Hakon answered firmly. No honorable leader punishes loyalty, even misguided loyalty. Edith considered his words, feeling the weight of choice upon her, perhaps the first true choice she had been offered since raiders had stormed her childhood home. I will stay, she said finally. But not wearing Lady Willa's identity. If I am to be here, let it be as myself. Hakon's smile transformed his stern face. Agreed. And who is this self I welcome to my hall? She reached up and removed the amber pendant, feeling a curious lightness as she placed it in his large hand. I am Edith, daughter of Eric the Scald. Once thrall, now freedwoman. And I would know the truth of what happened at Lindisfarne, so that perhaps old wounds might finally begin to heal. Summer waned into autumn, and Edith found herself increasingly integrated into the life of Hakon's settlement. What had begun as a temporary arrangement, a stay of 1 moon cycle, had extended as they awaited word from Jarl Nori. Hakon had sent messengers with a full accounting of what had transpired, Willa's deception, the misunderstanding about Lindisfarne, and his desire to forge a true peace based on honesty rather than forced alliance. Whether these messengers had reached Jarl Nori or whether Lady Willa had somehow intercepted them, none could say. No response had come. In the meantime, Edith had moved from guest to valued member of the household. Her knowledge of healing herbs, learned from Willa's mother, proved valuable when sickness swept through the settlement. Her skill with languages aided Hakon in trade negotiations with merchants from distant lands. And her quiet wisdom earned her the respect of even the most skeptical warriors in Hakon's retinue. For his part, Hakon found himself seeking her counsel with increasing frequency. Not merely for her insights, which were considerable, but for the simple pleasure of her company. They spoke of everything, the running of the settlement, the raising of his children, the old stories that bound their peoples together even in conflict. On this day, they walked the shoreline as the first autumn storms brewed on the horizon. Ulf ran ahead, collecting interesting stones and shells, occasionally calling for them to admire his finds. He has grown fond of you, Hakon observed. And I of him, Edith replied, smiling as the boy attempted to skip a flat stone across the waves. He has your determination. And my stubbornness. Yesterday he insisted on continuing his training despite a broken blister on his palm. A boy becoming a man wishes to show no weakness. She glanced at Hakon. Much like his father. You think me stubborn? I think you bear your burdens alone when you need not, she said carefully. The weight of this settlement, your people's safety, the uncertainty with Jarl Nori, you carry it all without complaint. Hakon was silent for several strides. It is a Jarl's duty to bear such burdens. Duty, yes. But alone? The strongest shield wall stands not because of one warrior, but because each supports the other. He studied her, this woman who had arrived as an impostor yet had somehow become essential to his household. In the months of her stay, he had come to anticipate their conversations, to value her perspective that was neither warrior nor thrall, but something uniquely her own. "If Jarl Nori rejects our peace offering," he said finally, "what then?" "Then you have lost nothing but the possibility of an alliance built on deception," she answered, "and gained the certainty that he values pride above the well-being of his people." "And you? What have you gained or lost in this strange twist of fate?" Edith stopped walking, turning to face the sea. "I have gained perspective. In Lady Willa's household, I saw only one side of an ancient conflict. I believed, as she did, that you were a monster in human form. And now? Now I see a man, flawed as all men are, but striving to protect what he loves. A leader who considers not just victory in battle but the peace that must follow." She turned to him, her expression unguarded. "I have gained freedom, Hakon. Not just from service, but from the narrowness of seeing the world through hatred's lens." Something in her words, in the way she spoke his name without title, reached into Hakon's chest and took hold of his heart. Before he could respond, however, Ulf came running back to them, excitement clear on his young face. "Father!" Ships approach, 3 of them, with red and white sails. Hakon's hand instinctively went to the sword at his hip. Jarl Nori's colors. Edith felt fear curl in her stomach. Has he come for vengeance? We shall soon find out. Hakon's expression hardened into the mask of a Jarl preparing to defend his people. Ulf, run ahead and alert the warriors. Then take your place with the Smith's family. If fighting breaks out, you know where to go. The boy nodded solemnly and sprinted toward the settlement. Hakon turned to Edith. You should seek shelter as well. She straightened her spine. I will face Jarl Nori at your side. This situation began with me, I will see it through to its end. Hakon's expression softened for just a moment, and he reached out to touch her cheek with a gentleness that belied his warrior's hands. Always surprising me, Edith, daughter of Eric. Very well, together, then. By the time they reached the shore, the ships had landed and warriors were disembarking. At their head strode Jarl Nori himself, a tall man with a silver-streaked beard and hard eyes that scanned the gathered defenders until they locked on Hakon. Beside him walked a woman whose bearing and features left no doubt as to her identity. Willa Norrasdottir had returned, her chin high despite the circumstances. Edith felt her breath catch. She had never expected to see her former mistress again, certainly not here, and the shock of it momentarily paralyzed her. Hakon stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Edith in a protective stance that did not go unnoticed by either of the newcomers. Jarl Nori, he called in greeting, neither friendly nor hostile. You come unannounced to my shores with armed men. I would know whether you come in peace or war. Jarl Nori halted a spear's throw away, his warriors forming a line behind him. I come seeking answers, Hakon Wargson. And my daughter's handmaiden. I am here, my lord, Edith said, stepping forward to stand beside Hakon rather than behind him. By my own choice. Willa's eyes widened at the sight of her, taking in her changed appearance, the clothes of a free woman, the confident stance, the absence of the amber pendant. You seem to have found a comfortable position here, Edith, Willa said, her voice cool but not unkind. When I returned home to find you gone and my father in a rage, I feared you had met a harsher fate. Your father received my messengers, then? Hakon asked. Jarl Nori's expression darkened. I did. A strange tale they told, of deception, misunderstanding, and an offer of peace based on truth rather than forced alliance. And yet you come armed, Hakon observed. A precaution only. The sea between our lands is not safe for unprotected ships. An uneasy silence fell between the two groups. Edith could feel the tension radiating from both sides, warriors ready for battle, hands never straying far from weapons. It was Willa who broke the impasse, stepping forward with unexpected grace. I have come to make right what I set wrong, Jarl Hakon. My flight was born of fear and hatred, a hatred nurtured since childhood on stories of Lindisfarne. Stories, I have learned, that held only part of the truth, Hakon acknowledged. As did mine. Willa nodded slowly. So I discovered when I returned home to find your messengers waiting. My father told me what your men revealed, that my uncles died not as innocent victims, but as protectors of those who had raided your people. The blood spilled at Lindisfarne cannot be undone, Hakon said gravely. But perhaps we can prevent more from being shed in vengeance for vengeance. Jarl Nori studied the man who had long been his enemy. My daughter tells me she cannot marry you, not from hatred now, but because her heart is promised elsewhere. To a Saxon lord she met during her flight. Murmurs rippled through both groups of warriors. Such an admission could be taken as grave insult, a reason for renewed hostility rather than alliance. Hakon, however, merely raised an eyebrow. It seems the Norns have their own plans, regardless of what we mortals arrange. His eye shifted briefly to Edith before returning to Jarl Nori. I find I cannot regret this turn of events. And yet, Jarl Nori pressed, our people still need the protection that alliance would bring against Saxon expansion. Without marriage to bind us, what guarantee exists that peace would hold? Perhaps, Edith said, surprising herself with her boldness in addressing two jarls, there is another way to secure such an alliance. All eyes turned to her. She felt Hakon's gaze most keenly, but kept her focus on Jarl Nori. Speak then, handmaiden, Nori said, though his tone held more curiosity than dismissal. I am no longer a handmaiden, my lord, but a freedwoman. And in these months at Jarl Hakon's settlement, I have come to know his people, his children, and the man himself. She took a steadying breath. If Lady Willa's heart leads her elsewhere, perhaps another marriage might still bind our settlements in alliance. Jarl Nori's eyes widened as her meaning became clear. Willa's lips parted in surprise. Hakon stepped closer to Edith, not touching her but standing near enough that his presence offered support. Edith speaks wisdom, as she often does. I would take her as wife, not as substitute for what was promised, but as her own self, bringing her courage and clear sight to my hall and my heart. You would marry my daughter's former thrall? Nori asked incredulously. I would marry this woman who has proven her worth through actions rather than birth, Hakon answered firmly. And in doing so, still bind our people in alliance, for she has served your household faithfully for many years, knows your customs as well as she now knows mine, and can bridge the understanding between us. A long silence followed his words. Edith stood perfectly still, aware that her future hung in the balance of Jarl Nori's response. She had spoken from her heart, offering a solution that might bring peace while also acknowledging the feelings that had grown between her and Hakon during these months together. Finally, Willa stepped forward again. Father, she said quietly, I owe Edith my life. When I fled, I knew the price of my deception might be her blood. That she stands here now, respected and whole, speaks to Jarl Hakon's honor. And that she would offer herself as bridge between our people speaks to hers. Jarl Nori's stern expression softened slightly. You surprise me, daughter. I had thought you consumed by hatred for Hakon and his kind. As was I, until I learned that hatred thrives in ignorance and withers in understanding. Willa turned to Edith with genuine regret in her eyes. I am sorry, old friend, for the danger I placed you in. Your flight brought me here, Edith answered simply. I cannot regret the path that led me to where I stand now. Jarl Nori looked between the two women, then to Hakon, whose steady gaze never wavered. Finally, he sighed, the sound of a man recognizing the inevitable shift of fate. So be it, he declared. Let there be alliance between our settlements, bound by marriage, though not the one we first envisioned. Let blood debt be considered balanced by the understanding of what truly happened at Lindisfarne. And let my daughter follow her heart to her Saxon lord, with my blessing rather than my curse. Relief washed through Edith like a physical wave. Beside her, she felt the tension leave Hakon's body as well. We will feast together tonight, Hakon announced, not as enemies, but as allies beginning the work of healing old wounds. As the warriors from both sides began to relax, moving toward the settlement with cautious optimism, Hakon turned to Edith. For the first time since she had known him, his face showed not the stern mask of a jarl, but the unguarded joy of a man who has found something precious when he least expected it. You would truly bind yourself to me? He asked quietly. I would, she answered. Not from duty or necessity, but from choice. The first true choice I have made in many years. He took her hand then, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. The gods work in ways beyond our understanding. What began in deception ends in truth. What began in hatred begins in love, she corrected him softly. For endings are also beginnings, are they not? Hakon's smile was answer enough. 3 days later, beneath a sky painted with the first stars of evening, Edith stood before the assembled people of both settlements. Gone was the plain attire of a freedwoman, replaced by a bridal gown of finest linen, embroidered with symbols of fertility and protection. Around her throat hung not Willa's amber pendant, but a simple silver torque, Hakon's gift, marking her as lady of his hall. Hakon waited for her beside the sacred fire, his son Ulf standing proudly at his side. From the crowd, Willa caught Edith's eye and nodded, not mistress to servant now, but woman to woman, each following the path the Norns had spun for them. As Edith moved toward her future husband, she remembered the frightened handmaiden who had sailed to these shores in another woman's place, certain she journeyed toward sacrifice. How strange the patterns the gods wove, transforming deception into truth, enemy into beloved, thrall into lady. Hakon took her hands as she reached him, and together they spoke the ancient vows that would bind them as husband and wife. Blood was mixed with mead, rings were exchanged, promises made before gods and people alike. And when at last they shared the ritual kiss that sealed their union, Edith felt the final weights of the past fall away. The blood spilled at Lindisfarne would never be forgotten by either of them, but in acknowledging that truth rather than hiding from it, they had created space for something new to grow. My lady, Hakon murmured against her ear as cheers erupted around them. Welcome home. Edith smiled up at the man who had begun as monster in her imagination and become partner in her reality. No more deceptions between us, she promised. Only truth, however difficult. Truth, he agreed, and the future we build from it. Around them, warriors who had once faced each other across battlefields now raised drinking horns together in celebration. Two peoples, long divided by blood and misunderstanding, took their first tentative steps toward genuine alliance. And at the center stood Edith and Hakon, living proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, that enemies could become allies, and that love, when built on honesty rather than illusion, could bridge what hatred had long divided.